let me just share this one screen with you because I actually break it down right here. So the quick version is that we encourage you to answer 3 questions when you show up. Say, who are you? What do you value? And what do you want? And the who are you is that piece of your personal identity where we really encourage you to show up as a person of faith, to share that personally, share the communities you're connected to, share your values, really name them and connect them to a story. And then share what you want in terms of a big picture, which is a thriving, clean environment for all. And then more specific, which is so vote yes on House Bill number. So that's just a little bit of our breakdown. But I think the last thing I'll say is I'm always encouraging people to take this faith forward approach, because there are so many partners in the secular environmental movement who have got the other piece covered. And it's easy for us to slip into that role. But again, when we show up with our faith, it brings a different tone to the conversation, a different weight. It can connect more with those ingrained values. And especially if we combine it with a good story, it can really be what a legislator remembers at the end of a long day.
And even beyond legislation, yes, Earth Ministry has been a tremendous advocate for a lot of the work that we've done with Lummi Nation. When we talk about totem pole journeys, they're on the forefront organizing, speakers and venues and everything else that whatever they can possibly put forward. They've also helped us with Netzimat, which is another kind of Lummi event. So in helping coordinate faith communities to do, to participate. So for doing that. And I'm sure there's going to be lots more coming up once when COVID goes away.
Oh, sure is. Yeah. Thank you, Deb. I appreciate that. Yes, we are very intentional in our partnership with Native nations in following the lead of tribal organizers and the overall strategy that's directed by the various nations that we support. So we do work with Lummi closely around orca recovery, mostly now, previously halting the coal export terminal. We are working with the Puyallup tribe in Tacoma to halt a fracked gas facility from going online. And then we are doing work on the east side of the state around salmon recovery and looking at how to restore abundant salmon runs and a healthy lower Snake River. So again, could teach a whole workshop on each of those, but just giving you a bit of an overview of our advocacy, because you're right, it isn't contained to the legislative session. We are really year round. My mentor, who some of you may know, Jesse Dye, used to joke that you can't just work out once a year and call it good, right? So you can't just show up and vote once every 4 years and be like, yeah, I did it. But advocacy, democracy is a year-long process, and we really believe that here. Before I dig in, any other kind of big picture questions? Okay, no one's jumping in. So wonderful. So our content today, as we said, is around state legislative action. Earth Ministry came to these priorities in coalition space, as I've mentioned. The Environmental Priorities Coalition, as well as the Climate Alliance for Jobs in Clean Energy, are our 2 main partners. And given the landscape of a virtual legislative session, we've really honed in and selected 2 priorities. And then we have a slate of additional bills that we're supportive of. So we'll do what we can. We'll sign in when it's timely, we'll endorse, but we're mostly putting the bulk of our energy around these two priorities that I'll share with you. Before we get there, I'll just share a little bit about the lay of the land with the virtual legislative session. And I'm curious, can I just see a show of hands? Is advocacy in the state legislature something that you've done before or are kind of familiar with? Like maybe do a thumbs up, like, yeah, a little bit, or like, no, never have I ever. Okay, let's see. Okay, we've got a bit of a spread, and that is A-okay. Thank you. That helps me just get a sense of where we're at. So, you know, in years past, I would, well, part of my favorite part of my job is, you know, coordinate and say, okay, like when does a group from Bellingham want to come down, and I'll schedule out your meetings with your legislator. We'll sit and have lunch together. We'll go over it all. We'll go walk through the halls of the Capitol, have our meetings. You know, one of the things I used to say was wear good shoes because we're walking on marble. We don't have that anymore. But what we do have is opportunities for you to weigh in without having to make that journey down. So maybe a bit less adventurous or fun, but definitely more accessible. And the main way that you can do that this session is by signing in at committee hearings. Previously, you had to be at the Capitol and on the Capitol like Wi-Fi or in the room of a hearing to sign in pro or con for a bill. Now you can do that from anywhere, and it's really pretty nifty. I will be sure to send you all goodies after this, so I'll send it out to the MNCJ listserv, but I have a whole step-by-step process for how you can sign in favor of a bill. But it's really turning out that that is the best avenue for us to engage at this point. And we're only in the second week of session, or we're just starting the third week. So we're still learning, they're still learning, everyone is adjusting. They've already made changes. So now you can see who has signed in and you can kind of get a number count. And what that does is tell the committee that is looking at a bill, wow, there is broad support for this. Look, it's from all corners of the state, people naming different affiliations. So on the sign-in sheet, you have an option to name if you're with a group, and you could say Earth Ministry, you can say MNCJ, you could say your house of worship. Yeah, that is seen and really being looked at by legislators. There's also options to submit written testimony, which is great. That also goes to the whole committee. So before session started, we weren't sure if it would actually end up getting read, and it's looking like sources have been saying that they are really looking at the written testimony that's submitted before the hearings begin. Finally, the third way is to testify live. And it breaks my heart to say this, but we're asking people to refrain from signing up for live testimony. And that's because there is just so much to get through in this very strange format and time when we have so much to do to care for our state, that we're trying to support bills with our sign-ins, with our showing up. That's like us filling the hearing room like we like to do in person. But the more people that sign up to testify, the longer those hearings take. So with one of our bills last week, we actually saw the hearing got extended to a second day. And then even there was, I think, a little bit of overlap into a third because so many people had signed up to speak. And that was a committee where we knew we had the votes. And so what it did was really slow down the speed of which it could get out of that committee. Because generally a bill has to get through 3 different committees. There's a issue specific one. So that's usually the Environment Committee for the bills we're looking at. Sometimes it'll also have to go to a second one, like transportation. Then there is, if it has a fiscal note, meaning if it has a line in the state's budget, it has to go to a fiscal committee. And then there's a rules committee, which also just makes sure that it's legal. So it's got to cross those hurdles before it even gets to the floor for a vote. And then it does the same thing on the other side, in the opposite chamber. So with session, with less bills being heard, less bills getting airtime, we really want to see things moving quickly. And unfortunately, not having everybody testify live helps with that process. That said, there will be times when it is especially important for our voices to show up. So Earth Ministry will keep you informed of when that is. Like if, you know, we're looking in, you're in a target district and we're like, we really need you to just send emails directly to your legislator. I would contact and send a note out to the listserv here. So there will be times like that. I know that many of you have a bit of a tough nut with Senator Doug Erickson, who does sit on the Environment Committee. And it's still important, even if you're, you know, think, oh, this person's values just never line up with mine. Still show up, still tell them why this is important to you, why it's grounded in your values, why your heart is in this, why it's for your kids, your grandkids, your niece, nephew, the kids down the street. Really humanize it as much as you can, because they're getting lobbied by industry, which is not using those talking points, right? So one of my favorite fun facts about advocacy in general is that it only takes 7 contacts on average to move a decision maker up or down a notch. So that doesn't mean they'll go straight from a no to a yes, but about 7 contacts can be enough for someone to say, oh, I should look more into that. Or, maybe I'll reconsider my vote. Or if you're confident they'll already vote yes, you can say, oh, well, that 7 contacts might be enough for them to step forward even further and really be a champion and talk across party lines about why this is important. So that's just my little plug for the power of your voice as a constituent. And, you know, look, we've got 40 people here today. So if we all write in about these bills, that could make a boost that really matters. The last thing I will say about the lay of the land, I usually start with this, but I don't think I mentioned it. They're saying about half as many bills will be introduced and even less will get hearings. So generally in the legislative process, there are bills that you run and it's a kind of an educational push the first few years. And then there's multi-year efforts where you've really built momentum year after year. So some of our supplemental bills will not make it far in the process, but it's still important to speak up for them while they're still involved so that we can lay that groundwork for them to continue in years to come. And such is the case with our current bill around cleaning up our transportation sector. So I'm going to move into that. Before I do, again, I want to pause and give you all a chance to chime in if there's any questions about the lay of the land with the state legislature. I see a hand from Bob.
I live in Linden, the 42nd Legislative District, and Doug Erickson. Doug barely won in his last election. He may be a little more sensitive to listening to some of us if we write him, not because he loves us, but because he may not want to make any stronger and more enemies. So I would encourage us to contact Doug Erickson if you live in the 42nd Legislative District. I don't think we need to call him any bad names or anything. We just need to express our support for something and our reasons why.
Yep.
And enough of those letters just might nudge him a little.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for that, Bob. Most certainly. And I can say kind of another, back to David's question of, you know, how does it look different for people of faith showing up? One reason why legislators' ears perk up when they know that you're a person of faith is that we're generally a constituency that votes. So our turnout numbers are higher than other constituency groups when it comes to re-election time. Earth Ministry is a 501c3. We cannot talk candidates. We stay nonpartisan in what we do work on based on nonprofit regulations. So I will just say that, but we can, you know, talk about the lay of the land and how it's important to show up to the people that represent us. Yeah, Betsy.
I just wanted to let people know that I have posted all our legislators' email addresses in the chat function, and I'll post them again because that was a while ago. You might have to scroll a ways to find them. So, you know, there you go. We're making it easy for you guys to email them. Thank you.
And the link to Earth Ministries Legislator Priorities page is also in the chat box.
Thank you, Deb. Thanks, Betsy.
And are we going to save the chat box? Can we save the chat box?
Yes, we can save the chat box. We'll make sure to do that.
Good idea, Linda. I know I'm like the millennial that's not great with all this Zoom technology, so I'm so bad at trying to follow the chat and talk. So always good to save. Okay, so let's talk about our bills then. So I am going to screen share again, and I'll talk about one of our bills and then pause for questions, and then we'll go back to the second. So we'll hold some time. Okay. Can I see a thumbs up if you can see my screen? Yes, okay. So here is our first bill. It is the Clean Fuel Standard. We have our bill numbers, our House Bill 1091. That is the primary bill that's moving. Most bills also have a companion in the opposite chamber. And for the Clean Fuel Standard, that is Senate Bill 5231. And in essence, what a Clean Fuel Standard does is require fuel producers to sell a cleaner product. So to clean up the fuel that they're making and putting out into the market. It also drives some investment in low carbon alternatives. And by the numbers, we are asking for a 20% reduction in the carbon intensity of fuels by 2035. So that means that 15 years from now, the emissions coming out of your tailpipe will be 20% cleaner than they are today. There will also be more options overall in terms of reduction of transportation fuels, carbon emissions. So we'll see more increased electrification and more creative ways of sourcing our fuel. So this is really achieved often by blending in biofuels, which are, you know, can have their problems. So the bill does a good job of really requiring a life cycle analysis of all fuels to ensure that they actually are less carbon intense. So we're not just going to start planting fields of corn to turn into ethanol. Instead, what it's doing is really looking at how can we use the most of what we already have. So it's a lot of repurposing of surplus, which I think is really neat and aligns with our values of really using everything, not using, but appreciating everything that the creator has gifted us. So examples are like places are picking up cooking oil from restaurants, so like French fry grease, and turning that into fuel. There can be fuel captured from waste in landfills. So it's really driving more innovation and locally created clean fuel industry, which is exciting. If you followed us for a couple years, you might be familiar with the Clean Fuel Standard. This is the 3rd year it's been run. It did pass the House last year, installed in the Senate, and we're looking positive that it will make it through this year, knock on wood. The one difference in policy between years past and this year is that this version of the bill grants authority to the Department of Ecology to extend the Clean Fuel Standard if that seems needed for our state to reach our climate emission reduction goals. So we updated those targets for our state's emission reductions last year. That was something Earth Ministry worked on, and you may have helped us with. So if you know, it's getting to 2035 and we're saying, oh, we still have a lot to do, ecology could extend and say, now we need a 50% reduction by 2050, for example. Briefly, why does this matter? So transportation as an overall sector is our largest polluter. It's causing nearly half of Washington's climate pollution currently. And we've really seen clean fuel standards work well elsewhere. So Washington is the last on the West Coast to not have a clean fuel standard. California, Oregon, and British Columbia have all implemented one. And that means that right now, all of the dirtiest fuel is getting funneled into our state because they can't sell it elsewhere. And we're actually producing a lot of clean fuels in state that is getting sent away to these other locations that do have this standard. The one other reason I'll say, and I should add this to my slide, is there's definitely an environmental justice component that is integrated in with a clean fuel standard. Air pollution that comes from the transportation sector really does have a direct correlation to human health and well-being. Even here in Seattle, so I'm in Seattle, and between the north and south end of the city, there's over a decade difference in life expectancy. And you see the port is down south, there's multiple highways, there's the airport. So a lot of air pollution, and that is really having a felt impact on communities. In terms of where the bill stands, it has passed out of the House Environment Committee, and we are now waiting to hear what committee it will be assigned to next. It may go to transportation, or it may skip and go to its fiscal committee. So to be announced, but we do really want to encourage folks to sign in the next time it is up at a hearing. Unfortunately, we did get to pull the numbers and saw that we were really outdone in terms of sign-ins. So there was about 3 to 1 of more con sign-ins than pro, which is not what we want to see. So we need to show up a bit more firmly for the Clean Fuel Standard in its next hurdle here in our process. Okay. I'm going to pause again and ask, and I'm sorry, Kathy, I know we said questions to the end, but it's just so hard to just talk to myself. So I want to hear from you all along the way. So any questions specifically about the Clean Fuel Standard? I think I see Jim raised a hand. It's telling me. Yeah, hey, Jim.
Yeah, hey, thank you. Can you speak a little more specifically to other things that will be blended in with the fuels, I'm having a difficult time understanding where the concept's going to come from of exactly how we're going to achieve this kind of goal. It seems like we can only run around and collect so much cooking oil from restaurants. So being more knowledgeable about what these sources are going to be would be helpful as we begin to advocate for it. Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So good question. I am not the fuel scientist, so I can just share my general understanding. And I actually did ask our campaign lead about that this week because I've been receiving other questions about it too. So she was sharing that, like I said, it's a lot of surplus. And so that can look like small scale, small business, like this idea of picking up cooking oil, which just sounds really unique and creative. But more broadly, on a broad production level, it's looking at waste from landfills, from agriculture, and forest waste. So really kind of looking at, they call it kind of a circular economy, which I think is, again, really beautiful with our values. And waste that's currently just discarded or left to slowly decompose and do its thing can be processed and turned into these fuels that are then blended in. We have seen it work on large scale in the other states. So that is good news, and seeing its positive impact in California especially. Yeah, Betsy.
Yeah, hi, Jessica. Was any, were there, I'm wondering if there were any conversations about skipping the clean fuel standard altogether and just creating a transition to electric vehicles?
Yeah, that's a good question. So it's a both and situation. We know that the climate crisis is big and we need to approach it from many different angles for a holistic healing for our planet and communities. So there is good conversation happening around electrification. One of the bills on Earth Ministry's supplemental list is a Clean Cars 2030 legislation, which is looking at requiring all vehicles to be electric by 2030 to be registered in Washington State. That's following the leadership of California. Theirs is set for 2035. So we want to push in that direction with electrification, and we have to deal with our current reality that many of us operate cars that run on fossil fuels. So we need to clean up what we're using in our current infrastructure setup. Because even like myself, when we got our last car, I really, really wanted to go electric, and I just couldn't because my job has me travel long distances to see you all, right? You know, having to work with what we have, clean up what we currently have, and then doing that alongside other legislation like this Clean Cars bill will help us push forward towards what we ultimately want to see. I saw Linda and then Scott.
I wanted to read a question that Seth put in the chat box.
Oh, yes, please do.
Seth, so I'm just reading it. Question on the House bill. 20% reduction seems a little low for reaching our state reduction goals. I guess I expected it to be higher, like 50% by 2035. Can you talk more about the selected percentage?
Yes. So great question, Seth, and thank you for reading that, Linda. Yes, it's not going to be what really, I mean, it will make a significant impact in this sector and it will have real positive benefits for our climate. It's, you know, has to go alongside many other policies and likely in time be strengthened. So we actually just saw that Oregon increased their clean fuel standard. So they passed it a few years back and now they gone back to revisit it, said, hey, we need to actually do more here. And it's so much easier to revisit a bill and amend it like that than it is to get it through both chambers with a higher percentage. So I wouldn't be surprised if we see something similar in Washington, especially since it includes this new provision for the Department of Ecology to extend it, which they most likely will. So it's, you know, can be frustrating to not see as strong of action out the gate like we would like to see, but also having to keep in mind the reality of the world in which we're in, which is very divided. And what we need is something that people can agree on enough to get it passed, and then we'll look at it down the road. Scott.
Thank you for your presentation. I realize that changing the fuel standard and getting more electric cars on the road are a both and solution, not an either or, so I'm good with both. I hope it's helpful to hear that in Rachel Maddow's interview with Senator Chuck Schumer tonight, Senator Schumer said that he intends to legislate so that no more gasoline or internal combustion engines are manufactured in the United States after the year 2030. And he hopes then that by 2040, all internal combustion engines will be off the nation's highways. And I live in Bellingham and was heartened that when I went grocery shopping this afternoon, the Fred Meyer on Bakerview had 4 electric charging stations in the parking lot, substituting for 2 parking spaces. So, yeah, let's get it passed and then revisit it.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you for sharing that. I think it will be something we see more and more, and really what we're doing by implementing a clean fuel standard here and elsewhere is breaking a monopoly that the fossil fuel industry currently has on how we get around, right? So really, you know, it's not an official monopoly, but it's basically a monopoly, and they can control the prices so much and really just want to keep us dependent on fossil fuels because it puts a profit in their pockets. So as we are encouraging with incentives like the Clean Fuel Standards provides, it also broadens the options for consumers and will help break that monopoly. Okay, I do want to save time to get to our second bill. So how about, I'm gonna go talk about that, and then if we have time, we can field a couple more questions about clean fuels. Does that sound okay? I will say Earth Ministry's website has so many more goodies that you can dig into. So there are fact sheets that you can download and look at. You can click through to the legislative website if you want to really read the bill info yourself. So there's more that you can learn, certainly, and more resources that we have for you. But for now, I'm going to go back to my slides and share about our second priority, which is the HEAL Act. And HEAL stands for a Healthy Environment for All. The bill number is Senate Bill 5141. And I'm super excited about the HEAL Act because what it will do is define environmental justice in state law and require its application across agencies. So that means that every agency looking at every policy moving forward will have to include analysis around environmental justice. There will be staff people dedicated to that work, and there will be more, what's the word I'm looking for? Accountability and reporting back to ensure that that's really happening. This comes out of the state's Environmental Justice Task Force. So again, if you've been following Earth Ministry's legislative work for a few years, you might remember there was a first iteration of the HEAL Act in 2019. It did pass both chambers, but then for politics reasons, instead of just passing it, they decided to create a task force and fund that to do some community listening work. So this task force met for the last 2 years, really did excellent work talking with communities most impacted, thinking through what would work with agency partners, so being realistic within it all. And they produced a report that came out in the fall. And then within that report is a set of recommendations. So this new version of the HEAL Act is one of those recommendations. And it really, in how it was created and how it will be implemented, it does a good job of centering those most affected by climate pollution. A bit about why. So as people of faith, we believe that where you live, your income, race, language, ability should not determine how healthy and safe you are. And unfortunately, that is not the case currently. One of the pieces that the HEAL Act would fund is a Washington's environmental health disparities map. And it's a really interesting tool. There's a link to it on our website, but you can click through and see the variance in health and how that's tied to pollution. So we've got work to do, but the HEAL Act is a really concrete pathway to incorporate the systemic justice that we need to see across our state. It has had its first hearing last week, and now it is waiting to be voted on. So most often there's one committee meeting where they do the public hearing, and then the following week or the week after, they'll bring it back forward for a vote. It has not been scheduled for a vote yet. So what we've been asked from our partners, oh my gosh, I almost forgot this. Our partners who are running this bill and really leading on it are the coalition called Front and Centered. They're a coalition of organizations that are all community of color led and also representing low income communities. So really aligning with our values there of standing alongside those who have historically been on the margins in crafting what future will work to heal their communities more impacted. So Front and Centered has asked us to put some pressure on the Senate Environment Committee to bring it forward for a vote. So if you're in the 42nd and Senator Erickson is on the committee, this is something that you can write to him about and say, we want to see it on the agenda for a vote. Please bring it forward. Again, you know, there might be philosophical differences there, but it's still important that he hear from us that this is a priority within his constituency and especially within the faith community. Because of all the bills I've worked on, and you know, this is my 8th year doing session. Yeah, wow. The HEAL Act is like so clearly aligned with our values as people of faith. So it's one that's important for us to show up for. Okay, before I stop share, I'm going to show you one more slide. We're not going to go into details here, but this is just our list of additional bills. Know that you can look into it all more on our website, which you'll have the link to multiple times. But we are looking at some other pieces of legislation around electric vehicles, like I mentioned, around land use and comprehensive plans with our Growth Management Act, and then some work with reducing plastic pollution. And then the last two here are more focused on the budget and kind of protecting environmental funding and getting a strong transportation package. So I'm not going to go into details on those, but there are more information and fact sheets on our website. If one of these really piques your interest, I encourage you to check it out.
HB 1220 has a hearing next week.
Yes. And so does the Senate Bill 5022. This is about the plastic pollution, is being heard tomorrow morning. So if you're like really want to take action tonight, go to Earth Ministries website, and there's a step-by-step for how you can sign in pro at a committee hearing, and you can use those instructions to sign in pro for this bill that will reduce plastic pollution. And again, it is Senate Bill 5022. Okay, so any questions about the HEAL Act? I see a hand up from Kevin. Hi, Kevin. Oh, you're, okay, there you go.
Hi, Jessica. Thank you much for that explanation. As I read the act, I was very excited about the title and the description, but when you outlined the details, what I understood you to say that environmental justice is a bill that was talking mostly about human beings and the effect of environmental pollutants on human communities. And so it's not as though this bill will not make it so that environmental quality must be considered in all bills. It's only environmental quality as it impinges upon human beings.
Yes, and so there is a focus on human communities, especially when we talk about environmental justice in general. And gosh, I could like preach a sermon on this, but I think we're kind of seeing that pendulum swing. So if we look at the environmental movement overall, early on, it was really focused in wildlife, right? It was like, save the polar bears. Yeah, I love animals, all for it. Definitely want to save the penguins. They're my favorite. So early emphasis on wildlife, now swinging back to heavy emphasis on human communities, which are a little bit seen as separate. And what in my opinion, we need to settle more in the middle and hold that both and is seeing our interconnectedness of all this web of life and holding that together. But I think right now we're still a bit in we need to turn our focus to human communities because we're really seeing higher rates of asthma, cancer, really, really significant stats showing us that pollution is harming different groups of people that is really tied to race and income in ways that aren't just. So right. I think a role we can play in the faith community is helping to promote that both and. Once again, you can see my Lutheran theology coming through a little bit because we're really all about that. Holding that complexity is not easy for us as human beings. And so that is something that we can bring within the faith community.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Ginny, did you want to pose your question? Or do you want me to read it off for you?
I'll let you read it, please.
Okay, Ginny had asked, when cars, etc., are abandoned or parked on property, the liquids do contaminate the environment. Do counties, cities, and towns have rules about these environmental impacts?
Oh gosh, I do not know. So I don't want to misspeak about anything. I would hope so. But I think that this would be a more local municipal response. And it's something that I'm not tracking at this time. So could be something good to reach out to your local city, county council member about to ask. Because we know runoff of dirty fuels definitely does contaminate our watersheds. And that's important. I see also while I have it up, there's some interest in building a relationship with your legislators. Yes, that's great. I think really starting individually, but then also showing up when they have events, like they'll have town halls, which will be virtual. And showing up there, having a strong faith presence, and then inviting them in. And if you do, I'm always happy to be a resource and help develop some strategy around that. So if that's something we're interested in, that would be great. Okay, I think we're close to time, but I do see a couple raised hands. I'm seeing a nod from Kathy. So I see Carol and Ray.
quick question for you, Jessica. Is there any energy behind work on a carbon tax in Olympia at this time?
Yeah, thanks, Ray. So there is certainly energy. There is also a lot of discord around putting a price on carbon and what mechanism works. Earth Ministry is waiting to see how the dust settles a bit. It is likely that we will be more supportive of the Washington Strong initiative, which is looking at a green bonds system to create some revenue and address with a carbon tax. That bill has not yet dropped. So we're waiting to see it and waiting for our partners who are really the policy folks to analyze it and provide some guidance. There is another initiative put forward by the governor called the Climate Commitment Act, working with the chairs of the environment committees on both sides. And really, unfortunately, that policy is not being supported by our partners who are in communities of color. We've seen a cap and trade prove to be harmful elsewhere, especially in California, in that it really can concentrate pollution in already impacted communities. And then also it's depending on this market-based strategy in which these big corporations can just pay off their pollution. And that's not what we want to see. So I could talk a lot more about that, but our current stance is that we, as a faith community, know that the climate crisis is a moral crisis, and also how we respond to the climate crisis is a moral issue. And so we want to ensure that communities are kept whole and not sacrificed or left behind in how we address climate change. And if we're hearing our partners in these communities very much opposed to this process as the step forward, then we have to follow their lead and say that that doesn't align with our values. There's no justice incorporated. If the people impact, you know, the governor can say, oh, it's got environmental justice. But if the people who are impacted, the people who have worked to develop the HEAL Act and have done all this listening are saying, no, this doesn't work for us, then we find that to be telling.
Thanks, very helpful, appreciate it.
Mm-hmm. Can I get a time check? How am I doing?
7:44.
You're doing fine. And I think you could take one or two more questions. Yeah, I think a couple more will be good. And then we should probably do our announcements. And then if people want to stay after the prayer, we may have some time. Folks may want to do that.
Happy to stick around.
Bob,
okay, so
I stand up for a while, so.
Okay, yeah.
I'll be brief. I'm really glad that we've got our ideals. I have ideals, like to pursue them, like to say, why can't we just do it? But I'm also glad that Earth Ministry, in the way you're describing it, has an eye on what's possible. And so from what I've understood from hearing from politicians over my decades, is that politics is the art of the possible. You've got your ideals and you want to press for them, but you can be right as rain and not succeed. Or you can take what you can get.
Right. I think that's it. Yeah, that's a important perspective to remind us of, Bob. And I think, you know, we want to work towards the world as it should be. And we are aware of the world as it is that we are walking in. We are kind of mindful in following our values and looking at where we can make a real impact, what's really possible, like you say, for change. Yeah. I think I saw another hand up, but now I've lost it. Was it Scott?
Quick detail question, looking for a quick detail answer. You said that Oregon's fuel standard was higher than the one that we're getting ready to vote for. I hope that quoting that standard will be motivating to the church people with whom I communicate. Could you tell us what the Oregon standard is compared to Washington's 20%?
Yes, I don't have it off the top of my head. But let me just pull it up really quickly here. If only my internet would be a little faster in this work from home world. Okay, so it's in 2009, it was 10% below 2015 levels by 2025. That goal has been doubled. So now it is looking at 20% by 2030 and 25% by 2035. So they're looking at a 5% higher than what we're currently pushing for. But it's promising to see that it was doubled. It's showing raised hand from Carol and Ray. Did you have another question? Nope, okay. Not a problem. I will say that I'm happy to be a resource for you all as a community, for you individually. If you're really energized about either of these bills, feel free to let me know and I can fill you in when there's especially timely actions. And yeah, I just, again, will really encourage us to remember to show up faith forward with our advocacy, share that you're a member of the Bellingham Multifaith Network for Climate Justice, share that you're affiliated with Earth Ministry, share that you're spending your Monday nights learning about this because you think it's so important for our shared future and our common home. And the more of us that do that, the more they'll know who they're really meant to represent. So that's my little mini sermon here. But I think we're just about at time. So like Kathy said, I can stick around if there's any lingering questions or if anyone wants to talk more about affiliation. But I think we've got announcements next up.
Yeah. So Mr. Hansen, it would be really lovely if we can just have the big Zoom room, because we have kind of a popcorn set of announcements that the faces are going to change real quickly. And we have about 5 minutes to do it. And they'll go. I mean, they're just very quick, as I had said. Deb Cruz, did you want to say anything about offering additional training for some of these skills?
You're on mute, Deb.
God. Yeah, so Jessica was talking about how to go in and sign up and sign on pro and sign up for committees. Not only does she have the step-by-step on site, but if you want me to help you walk through it so you can actually see it, you know, I can schedule a small group meeting and help people get oriented to ledgewa.gov, which is the website, and has a tremendous amount of other information on it as well. And the Legislative Information Office or Center has pre-recorded videos that you can sit and watch, that one of them will take you through the legislative process from, you know, like Schoolhouse Rock. We'll take you through and talk to you about the importance of the committees and how to negotiate those passages between the House and the Senate and the fiscal committees and all the rest of that. And they do have a couple of more advanced ones that you could go in. So we could just kind of take and explore the site a little bit, as well as show you how to do testimonies, how to write things, signing up and whatnot. So that's, I'm available if anybody wants to do that.
So Deb, if people put in the chat, put their information that they'd like to know more, then we can get maybe a list of folks that would be wanting to do this. And we're going to hold the chat so we can probably call that out. So
you want to do it that way?
Yeah. So if you're in this meeting and you would like to have a tutorial from Deb, put your name, sign into the chat that you're interested.
we have your email from having signed on to the meeting, so we can find you and get back to you. We know how to do it.
Just don't forget to save the chat.
Yeah, and Steve is going to say yes. No one signs off.
Everybody save the chat.
We keep talking about that. So then Julie Johnson has something that she wants to just briefly announce about. We're reactivating 2 committees. And outreach is one of them. So Julie, are you handy to share what you'd like to share?
Thanks. Yes, MNCJ is developing an outreach committee to build stronger kind of connections with faith and spiritual communities, with the hope of kind of having stronger, developing a strong network of connections for information sharing and education and activism and other activities. So Bob, we're gonna meet next week for the first time. Bob Reisenberg, Barb Davenport, Dan Largier, and I were starting. And so if you have an interest in learning more about this or some interest in participating, you can email me and I'll contact you. And I'll put my email, Julie Johnson, into the chat.
Okay.
That's it for me.
Sweet. So if you're interested in being in touch with Julie, it's your job to get her email out of chat and contact her. So that's a little different than how we're going to handle how we're going to connect people with Deb. So that's just kind of
well, you can also, you can also post to the listserv. Just I'm interested in the outreach committee, and I will I'll pick that up. So
she'll get you. Yes. And then Dave Ketter or Karen, did you want to just throw in a couple words on the Spiritual Activism Committee?
Yeah.
Are you handy? Okay.
I can do that. And Karen can chime in if I miss anything important. About a year ago, we had briefly a Spiritual Activism Committee to track a whole bunch of different types of legislation, especially, well, mostly policies here in Bellingham. But we're, you know what happened during COVID? We went dormant and now we're resurrecting ourselves. And we've got 4 people, including Karen, and a couple more who have indicated their interest. And if you are interested in joining us, that would be great. We'd probably be convening a coordinating committee first of maybe 4 or 6 people, and then add on other members as needed. So I, like Julie, am going to throw my email in the chat and with a little bit of instructions, and you can grab that and email us. And Karen's been doing a lot of research behind the scenes here and ready to do a data dump with me sometime in the near future. And I hope others can join us as well. So there goes my information, and hope to have you on the committee.
Yes, thank you, Dave. And so I'm going to try to summarize some of the things that we have in the chat and also remind you of some of the things that were said earlier. And one of the first things I'd like to encourage you to do is actually go to earthministry.org and look for the Big Bold Jewish Climate Festival information that they have there. Rather than trying to give you the whole rundown on what's happening, it's 3 or 4 days, and it's just beautifully laid out. So go to earthministry.org, and then you can look at many of the other things that Jessica has pointed out. But it will be looks like a really lovely festival. You can sign up for everything or just one thing. Some of them are midday, some of them are in the evening. So really take a look at the schedule, because there's something there, many things that we can take in and enjoy. Way earlier in the chat, I put in the Whatcom Conservation District's information on their native plant sale. So in conjunction with planting 1 million trees, if you would like to support the Conservation District, their native plant sale is happening. They're taking orders now for delivery in early March. And the information is, you can either just go to their website or look for that in what will be a chat summary of some sort being posted at some point in time. And so, and then I think many of the other things we will just be looking for in the chat, but we have legislators, their emails and endpoints and other things. So with that, I would like to just check, Betsy, do you have anything you want to add at this point?
No, you've done a magnificent job of organizing us once again, Kathy. Thank you so much.
It's a tribal effort. Anyway, and so what I would like to do before we close in prayer is thank all of you for coming. Thank Jessica. Thank Rabbi Samuels for our opening prayer and the sharing on the Jewish Trees Festival of Trees. And then remind you that MNCJ will be meeting the fourth Monday. This meeting is, we'll be having it the fourth Monday on Zoom, and to look for that, for information on that coming your way, and hopefully set that time aside to be with us. And so Glory Johnson has agreed to do a closing meditation. So if we can pull up Glory, we'll be ready to close.
I'm here.
There you are. I know that face.
So I am going to be doing a little bit of a guided meditation. So at this point, I invite you to all close your eyes and take a deep breath. Feel your feet on the ground, connected and rooted into Mother Earth. And then take a stretch and stretch your arms up high, reaching to the cosmos, knowing your bones have stardust in them. We gather today because of the love of Mother Nature that we all have. I invite you to picture a moment in nature when you were just in awe of what you were experiencing. Let that energy fill you. And as you're with that energy, I'm going to read a section from Braiding Sweet Grass by Robin Wall Kimmerer. When I first read this section in the book, it brought tears to my eyes because my heart was open to this great love from Mother Nature. So with your eyes still closed and hearts open, here's what Robin writes. Maybe it was the smell of ripe tomatoes, or the orioles singing, or that certain slant of light on a yellow afternoon, and the beans hanging thick around me. It just came to me in a wash of happiness that made me laugh out loud, startling the chickadees who were picking at the sunflowers, raining black and white hulls on the ground. I knew it with a certainty, as warm and clear as the September sunshine. The land loves us back. She loves us with beans and tomatoes, with roasting ears and blackberries and bird songs, by a shower of gifts and a heavy rain of lessons. She provides us and teaches us to provide for ourselves. That's what good mothers do. I looked around at the garden and I could feel her delight in giving us the beautiful raspberries, squash, basil, potatoes, asparagus, lettuce, kale, and beets, broccoli, peppers, Brussels sprouts, carrots, dill, onion, leeks, and spinach. It reminded me of my little girl's answer to, how much do I love you? This much, with arms stretched wide, they replied. This is really why I made my daughters learn to garden, so they would always have a mother to love them long after I'm gone. Mother Nature loves us back, and in return, we love her back by being part of groups like this and fighting for her well-being. Her love to us has been never ending and always giving. Amen.
Thank you, Glory. Oh, so I'm going to save the chat, and others who know how to do that, you're welcome, of course, to do that as well. because you can actually do it yourself. But I would encourage you to do it if you know how, as I said, and we will summarize this and have it on the listserv at some point, not too long. So just wonderful. Thank you everybody for coming. And I guess at this point, if there are any more really quick questions, we could hold for a couple of minutes to take them, but otherwise the evening is done. Oh, Julie, yeah.
My question is, can the chat be, can someone kind of consolidate the chat and post it to the listserv?
Yeah.
The resources. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I think that'll be good. I've got it, and then maybe a couple of us will kind of share it together and figure out, you know, the best way to do that. Cull out what everybody needs and send Deb what she needs, and just verify that other folks have their pieces too. So yeah.
Yeah. And I'm going to stop the recording now. I'm going to put it on the website, on the homepage, mncj.org.
Great, thank you.